Rome, thank you very much indeed for speaking to us. Let's turn now to Luke Devlin, who's a member of the Catholic Worker Movement. Good afternoon to you, Luke. Just your thoughts on the Pope's passing.
Well, Pope Francis, for those of us involved in social justice and the wing of the church, if you like, that advocates for action on climate change, poverty, inequality, support for refugees and asylum seekers, was an incredibly strong advocate for that message. He was someone who supported the gospel in its fullness, including its radical call for support for the poor. Some years ago, a group of us from Glasgow and around, including many others around the world, were in the Vatican for something Pope Francis assembled called the Jubilee for Socially Excluded People. So that was people who were homeless or experiencing poverty from around the world, about 3,000. And there was a few of us from Glasgow and Scotland more generally who attended that. So it included folk from housing schemes and people with lived experience, some of whom had never been abroad before. And he gave an incredibly powerful message to our audience there, where he actually apologised on behalf of the church and behalf of Christians who didn't take enough action in poverty, and he actually asked for forgiveness for all the times that Christians looked the other way. So it was incredibly humbling and a real gesture of his incredible passion for social justice within the church.
That commitment to social justice, does that go back to his own childhood? And I wonder also the fact that he was the first pontiff ever to hail from South America. Was that a factor?
I think so. I mean, his work in Buenos Aires before he became Pope, he was known for advocacy for the poor there and for travelling on public transport and so on, something which he carried on doing to a certain extent when he became Pope, although obviously his circumstances changed massively. I think that did influence how he carried out his papacy and how he led the church, because he wasn't coming from, if you like, the centre of power and wealth within the West or within the global North. He was coming at it from someone who saw, and of course the majority of the world's Catholics now do live in the global South. He really lived out what's, you could almost call it, liberation theology being brought back into the church, the preferential option for the poor, prioritising that as what Christianity is all about, and living out that faith in practice.
Where did he stand on other social issues like sexuality, the ordination of women, tackling child abuse? Would you see him as an orthodox, more traditionalist figure, or do you think in some ways he did try to reform the church?
He did try to reform the church. It is complex because he certainly was radical in many ways, but traditionalist in others. So with regards to the ordination of women, he oversaw a commission which has been studying for several years now the question of the ordination of women, specifically the ordination of women as deacons rather than priests, because we know in the Bible, in St. Paul's letters, he actually refers to a female deacon in the early church, Phoebe. So there's a scriptural precedent there, but that's been slightly slow and kind of certainly some advocates for women's leadership in the church view it's kind of been kicked into the long grass, although he has reformed in other ways. For example, more women are in positions of leadership within the Vatican departments. With regards to same-sex relationships, again, it's a mixed story in terms of he did introduce a form of blessing for people in same-sex relationships, which was not a marriage ceremony and was not recognised as a wedding, but nonetheless was a form of words that priests could offer in church informally, that was a blessing of the individuals within a same-sex union. And again, that left those who wanted more strong reform unhappy that it wasn't a full marriage, and it also left conservatives and traditionalists unhappy that this form of blessing was taking place at all. And with regards to child abuse, many are very unhappy with how unsatisfactory reform has been within the church. Pope Francis himself has had um, a few cases of people that he's known to be close to were actions, including cases in Argentina, in which he has been accused of, or was accused of, not taking strong enough action. But in many ways, this is part of leading such a global, complex organisation. The Roman Curia, the Roman government, is not. The Pope is not an absolute monarch that can do whatever he wants. There's a huge apparatus there that he works within. But certainly, I'll remember him in terms of his teachings, his encyclicals, advocating very, very strongly and building on previous social teachings of the church to advocate for what I would call the real spirit of Christianity and of the Gospels, which has given many of us so much encouragement during his papacy.
Luke Devlin, thank you very much indeed for sharing your thoughts with us. Luke Devlin, who's a member of the Catholic Worker Movement.